We now have a session on digital credentialing standards, frameworks, protocols, and best practices. Can I invite the moderator, Elizabeth Garber, to introduce her panel to you?
Hello, I'm actually going to let my panelists introduce themselves in just a moment, but I'm Elizabeth Garber. I work with a number of nonprofits in the identity industry. Today I'm wearing the hat of the OpenID Foundation, which develops standards for secure, interoperable, and privacy-preserving identity ecosystems. Let's invite everyone to come up and introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Kristina. I currently work for German Federal Agency for Disruptive Innovation. If you've heard EIDAS 2, every single European member state is responsible for delivering a wallet with digital credentials before the end of this year, and I'm responsible for the German national wallet. I think I'm here also because I have been the editor and author of a lot of standards used in building these systems. So that includes OpenID for verifiable presentations, verifiable credential issuance, which have been largely used to issue and present credentials. SDJOT, that's one of the credential formats. I used to co-chair the W3CV CDM, have been heavily involved in ISO MDOC work. So yeah, that's me.
Hey, and my name is Juan Caballero. I also work for a lot of organizations, but today I'm wearing the Decentralized Identity Foundation hat. Decentralized Identity Foundation has done a lot of R&D over the years on VC systems and tooling, and yeah, I guess I'm here speaking on behalf of some implementers I have represented and/or worked for.
Hi everyone, my name is Vishwanath Vaidyanathan. People call me Vishwa. I'm part of MOSIP. I've been with MOSIP for past 5 years. I lead the architects group in MOSIP. ING is a product which uses verifiable credentials predominantly. The MOSIP, if you see, there are 3 actual verticals. We have identity, we have e-signet, which is on the authentication side, and then we have ING. ING is something very close to me because I was there when ING started, and past 3.5 years what we are working with ING. I am bringing to this panel on the implementation side, going through a lot of standards, understanding the standards, interpreting it and implementing it. Yes, happy to be here.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, so we're going to start this conversation with a discussion about credential formats, first of all. I remember, I don't know, 4 years ago, early-ish days, the Middle Ages maybe, of Digital Credential Protocols Working Group at the OpenID Foundation. There was a slide that made the rounds that had, I don't know, a dozen plus credential formats on it. It was produced by one of our mutual colleagues, Torsten Lauderstedt. I would love for those of you like Kristina and Juan who have been really involved in the development of these specs to give us a little bit of a history of the evolution of credential formats.
Sure. I mean, I think it depends what you, how wide a net you're casting, right? So nowadays we have credentials that are verifiable. We have verifiable credentials in the W3C sense. We have the digital credential API that sort of falsely makes a false equivalence between many different formats that have sort of different, not different properties, but different requirements or affordances, particularly for the architect who has to implement them. They're really different how much security you get out of the signature and where the signature goes and how you check. So the history of all of these credentials is sort of a history of trade-offs and optimizations. So they all have different architectural assumptions or optimizations built in, and so it varies a little from use case which you want to use. But in terms of the history, I think some of them evolved in specific protocols or specific ecosystems. Some of them were more translation or computationally intensive protocols were assumed in them. So they're kind of varied. But I think nowadays people are talking mostly in this context for the kind of use cases people use MOSIP for. There's the VCDM, the W3C verifiable credential, SDJOT, the MDoc, MDL, ISO standards. Those are sort of the big three nowadays.
Okay, the big three. Kristina, did you want to add anything?
You were
Sure,
the author
sure.
of several
Sure,
of
yeah.
them.
I think just kind of picking the characteristics, right? So MDoc has been optimized for offline use cases. That's why it's in CBOR. It's originally been optimized for sending it over Bluetooth, NFC, which has some limitations in terms of size, and also because some companies implementing it wanted to do encryption and signing within the secure area within the phone, right? So that also has bandwidth limitations. That's one of the design drivers there. And also that thing, MDoc is optimized, as Juan kind of mentioned, within a stack, vertical stack, which includes the protocol, how to send it, including Bluetooth, including the credential format, and notorious 18.13-5. W3C comes more from linked data, like, if I'm not shy, from the people who believed in the benefits of RDF, linked data, etc., and that's what drove those design principles there. SDJ, the reason why we started working on it, because we needed a simple credential format that was not CBOR, because we were mainly looking at the web use cases. And we did not need the complexity of linked data and signatures there. So that's what drove SDJOT. And I think what Elizabeth hinted a little bit, I think when we started working on Paying for VP, we kind of could already see that either are going to be no winner within all this space, or we can't pick one. So that's why the format is, protocol Paying for VP is optimized for like any credential format, right? So if I'm being extreme, and I've seen actual implementation of it, you can even send ICAO DTC over OpenID for VP. And that's extremely important because at the high level, they do the same thing. You have a signature by the issuer, which contains the data about the user, and you can have a proof of possession that user can prove that it's my signature, right? Like they do the same thing, just in a slightly different manner. So if you have to implement it, you have to implement it from scratch, but at least we wanted to minimize the re-implementation. That implementing different credential format does not impact the underlying protocol. So I think, to wrap it up, I think the layers we're seeing now is this underlying layer, whether you're sending it offline over NFC Bluetooth, or you're sending it over HTTP, TLS, the web world. That's the lowest layer, simplifying, and then you have this credential protocol layer where you're saying, give me this credential, right? This is the credential I'm talking about. And then you have this actual package of how the issuer package the thing, like CBOR, JSON, whatever, which is like the blob that's being sent, stored, managed. And on top of that, you probably have the signatures, X549 certs, and trust certificates, and everything.
Thank you. Okay, so now I want to go over to Vishwa. In your role at MOSIP, both guiding governments or working directly with governments, not necessarily in a guidance position, and also when you're making decisions about INGI, how do you decide which formats to support? Or how have you seen governments decide as well?
Okay. When we were starting in INGI, INGI is also a very small project when it started. So we also would like to support one format, right? So, but eventually we came to know that is no more a reality, right? When we are working with governments, let's take INGI's example. We started with VCDM 1.1, and then when it is 2.0, we did the 2.0 part. But when we are working with governments, since they have a PKI-based infrastructure which is already in the country, so there was a constant ask, can we somehow make the credentials also trustable in the same line of thought, right? So which actually pushed us towards having implementation for SDJOT. So we had a similar different argument for MDoc. So the reality is there's not going to be one, at least for some amount of time, is what we are also seeing. And there's been a lot of ask from countries for various formats based on the use cases. Now, use cases also, see, for example, university degree credentials kind of use cases, countries and the implement is very comfortable with W3C VCDM, right? But any kind of driving license involved, people are more towards MDoc because of the interoperability. So the reality is it's going to be multiple and it's going to be use case driven. This is what we are seeing with our country interactions.
Were you about to add something? Okay, so takeaway one from this panel, no one format to rule them all. Okay, so if no one format is going to rule them all, what does that then mean? If I have an implementation, can I just keep adding formats? Do I need to make decisions up front? What are the architectural implications?
I can tell a bit of a European tale in EUDI, in EIDAS too. So it started everything VCDM, then it went to everything ISO, and then there was this political compromise. We can't pick one. We don't want to make upset like many people. So the political compromise was the key government credential will be in both formats, MDoc and SDJOT. It's a political compromise because people couldn't agree, like they do the same thing and we're stuck with it. I can tell you as an implementer, it's painful maintaining the same thing for two formats. So if you can avoid it, do not do it. But like what that means in reality is issuer has to issue in both formats. Wallet needs to be able to manage both formats. So hopefully verifier for whom we want to simplify things can choose one or the other and don't have to understand both, right? In an ideal world, I think, and maybe you can disagree, issuer should also be able to pick one, you know, and it's going to be use case wise. Issuer picks one. The wallet will have to support a lot of things. Like I don't think for wallet you can allow to be that opinionated about any of this, and the verifier will have to support the format for that use case. So if as a verifier you, for example, want EU government credential and MDL and let's say educational credential, that might mean you need to support SDJOT for PID, MDoc for MDL, and VCDM for educational credential, but it at least means one per use case, right? So I think we don't have one format to rule it all, but hopefully we're getting to a place where at least it's like one per use case, and maybe it's bad, but maybe it's good, I don't know, but I think it's at least better than everything for everything.
Yeah, there's this sort of ongoing problem of the N by N interoperability. If everyone has three choices and you have three or more actors in the system, everyone has to support, I don't know, 27 code paths. It's chaos. Yeah, I think that there, particularly between VCDM, ISO, MDoc, and SDJOT, they're slightly different. So if you build for one and then you're hoping to bolt on one of the other two later and be able to sort of translate or have some sort of outsourced translation equivalence, you can end up in some tricky architectures. You can end up with maybe a weird dynamic. So I always advise caution, or I advise research before promising multiple formats are possible in every use case. I think, as Kristina said, it is plan A if you have one credential format per type of document or use case, and you can just layer it more cleanly that way. If you get into translation between the two, it's always a little gappy. It can throw a wrench in otherwise cleaner timelines and budgets and market dynamics.
I would like to add from the government perspective, actually issuing in multiple formats, which we might see one more new format coming in, right? But the government systems where the issuance system is built, and if you want to change and add one more format, it is very tough. We have a lot of experience even for upgrading. We had a platform in MOSIP 115, which was one version which was like 4 or 5 years old, and we did an LTS version. So much of effort involved in convincing a country to upgrade system. It's always, they come back and tell it's working, why should we even upgrade, right? So issuance is going to be a little tough. That's what we are seeing. Wallet, I will definitely agree. It has to support everything. And verifier, we are thinking since there is a business involved, there is a, in terms of value, what they get out of is involved. Maybe they'll be okay to do or accept multiple formats and also keep improving and evolving with the formats, is what we are seeing from the government side of the story.
Does that differ in different markets, do any of you think, in terms of the willingness of verifiers to implement multiple formats? Does it depend what kind of credentials are available? I'm thinking the US market might be very different from the MOSIP marketplace, for example.
Surprisingly not. Like
No?
I know an issuer in America who still runs on mainframe, very old mainframe that is like really hard to adjust to anything new, right? And I feel like verifiers are the same anywhere. For verifiers, this identity proofing part is just cost in a business that they have to do legally for KYC or whatever reason. If they can simplify and cut costs there and make users less pissed off at them, making to go them through this friction process, they're happy, right?
Is there a difference, though, in terms of driving adoption and the levers and how we reduce?
I think the wallet situation is surprisingly different across the world. I feel like, and that has probably something to do with how much the users trust or not trust specific actors in the ecosystem. Like, for example, in the US, it's heavily driven by Google Wallet, Apple Wallet, right? Versus in Europe, it is heavily driven by government-built wallets. I'm not sure about your markets in MOSIP, actually. I feel like it's less Google Wallet, Apple Wallet as well. It's more some third-party provided wallets. And that influences a lot of interactions with issuers and verifiers from my experience.
I think the impact part is still less. I think that is something we are yet to see.
So how do we reduce the burden on the verifier for implementing in the context of multiple credential formats, multiple protocols? Can we do all of it as a verifier?
I think if you have the luxury of a use case that isn't very international, if you don't need to accept every credential that might come from anywhere in the world, it's pretty easy to keep things simple. But once you open things up to all of the corner cases, all of the imported credentials and international stuff, then you inevitably get into some form of translation or notarization, attestation from someone who, you sort of like get into these niches where you have to, the only way to take weight off the verifier is to enable some sort of helper vendors that just can import credentials from vast international brownfields and say, okay, I certify, I ensure, I vouch for this being equivalent.
But also, I don't think this technical implementation of protocols and credential formats is the biggest burden for verifiers right now. Because there, thank God, we have open source libraries, we have vendors who are willing to make business providing those toolings. So what we're doing with Germany, which is pretty unique in my opinion, and I wanted to double click in our next fireside chat, but we have something called Ecosystem Management Portal, where we help relying parties technically too, but also from like a legal and business perspective, because on top of these technical things, the trust part is very important. Like as a verifier, how do I get the root of trust of an issuer so that I can even validate the signature of that issuer, right? And even if it's old good X5 or 9, you still need to have the chain and everything, and some issuers might have additional rules. From a legal perspective, again, like I need to, at least in Europe, for example, you need to register as a relying party to be able to access these credentials. So how do I register? How do I prove to this registrar that I'm a legitimate company, that I'm a person who can represent that company, right? And like legally, who is responsible for what things if something goes wrong, the signature is wrong, or the wallet's compromised, and I accepted the credential from a compromised wallet. These are very important questions, and I think they are actually where we're starting verifiers to, struggle more these days.
Yeah.
One small point to add, very true. Supporting all these formats as a verifier is going to be a nightmare. At least from NG side, we recognize this because we do this, right? Because we are working with countries. And we want to do the digital transformation in the countries and provide the necessary toolkits. So from that angle, what we are trying to do is somehow abstract these complexities using NG. NG is one way of doing it. But that could also be one of the solution. If there is an open source project, not only NG, it could be anything else. If a community is coming around and building something where it is going to have these complexities built, but collectively built, right? And then all these verifiers are going to piggyback on that particular learning and that particular tooling to do this, is one way of easing the pain for verifiers, maybe for a while.
Open source can create like a healthier market. If verifiers are new to this complexity, they need a little help. Like Kristina said, particularly on the legal and trust services side, figuring out how to be a verifier, like how to, be liable for what they verify. And I think getting open source is a good way to build a market that has some sort of credible openness. Like it helps people know maybe you're only choosing from 2 or 3 or 4 vendors now, but at least it's not a completely captured in advance market. Like at least it's 3 or 4 vendors that use a lot of open source tooling in common, so they won't all get gobbled up and be one vendor in the life cycle of this use case or something.
Okay, so I think I've heard a few key points that I just want to make sure have landed. I've heard open source tooling and having a community that helps verifiers to manage all of these credential formats and protocols. Avoiding the pitfalls. I think this was your first point, Juan, avoiding some of the pitfalls of having middleware do too much of the translation. And then Kristina's point, I believe, nets out to be around some of the biggest burdens to relying parties is really managing trust and understanding who to trust and following the chain of trust to an anchor. You're jumping in.
No. I'll let you finish, sorry.
No, I'm finished. I don't want to get it wrong. So
No. You summarized really well. I just wanted to chime in with the point before I forget it. I think what drives these choices, the technical choices, is very interesting to me as someone who's been involved in this for like 9-10 years. Like in some cases, it's been regulation, right? Like in the EU, it's regulation that finally settled all these technical battles that have been dragging us and preventing us for like focusing on actually going to production, right? In some cases, it's 2 big companies that we rely on, right? Like in terms of when you talk about digital credentialing in Wallet, you rely on the browser vendors and you rely on the mobile operating system vendors, right? So in some cases, it's been the choices driven by those providers, because if they're not allowing to flow a specific protocol or a specific credential format through their system, it's a problem. So like we're facing it in Europe right now, at least in Germany. Like I cannot build what I want to build because one of the companies is not allowing like what I want to flow through their APIs, right? In other cases, I think it's been industry organizations. Like I think in MDO case, like it's a lot of like the ministries of transportation coming together and saying, hey, we want to solve this. Like use case driven, so to say. So I think like what drives the choice is been very interesting to me. And I think one thing I care is at least you should have a choice. You should not be forced into doing something.
So we've had a lot of talk on stage around use cases and use cases really driving these decisions. What have you learned in the implementations that you've been a part of about which use cases are the most helpful in building an ecosystem? And I'd like to think about assurance levels in this. Is it better to start within a given jurisdiction with a use case that is really low stakes, doesn't require a strong degree of assurance that that person is who they claim to be? Or is it better to start with those high stakes use cases, like financial services use cases, for example? Any lessons learned? And I guess what I'm thinking of is in terms of the outcomes, user adoption, relying party or verifier adoption.
Well, I would say maybe I'm not sure you can generalize universally whether how high or low to start on the level of assurance scale, but I do think just comparing more and less successful rollouts, it's kind of an economics problem. Like, you want to create a flywheel, you want to create a stable use case that drives ongoing adoption, right? So if people are tempted a lot of times to do really high stakes, high value ones to start with, because it's assumed that once you get critical mass of people using the wallet and accepting the wallet in real world business, it'll sort of snowball, and then everyone, like you're investing up front to get that credential everywhere. But then you're risking a lot of the timelines of, banks are like, no, it takes us 8 years to tell you with certainty that person is the person they say they are.
I don't think we have an answer, but I think we have two interesting use cases playing out in Europe right now. So by regulation, this government-issued credential code PID has to be the highest level of assurance, which is, I can tell you, insane amount of scrutiny, insane amount of certification, requirements, etc. In Germany, we're going straight to that, straight to highest. That's why, right now, my team need to go through certification, need to go through all the security code reviews, etc., etc. France, meanwhile, actually started with a low level of assurance substantial, and they're already in production, they're rolling it out. And it's interesting that they're apparently, again, maybe I shouldn't quote it here because it's what I heard secondhand and I don't think report is public, but it's starting to look like 70%, 80% of use cases out there do not need level of assurance high, right? When you're in the border control, you probably need the highest level of assurance, but for bank account opening, probably substantial is okay. But without this legal clarity, RPs just go the safer way, and if there's no legal clarity, they just go technically we think substantial is okay, but there's no clarity, so I think we're just gonna go safe and aim it high. So I think it's kind of this play-off between what is required to complete, what assurances the wallet can provide in terms of security, and the government strategy.
I can double click on the substantial complexity, right? So, but it should also drive a value to the countries. So countries would like to really try and see the value, then it goes. So that's why we do pilot and production, right? So substantial amount of complexity or use case is something good enough. At least our examples has been banking, maybe giving an verifiable credential for a farmer, saying that what kind of crops they grow, how much land they have. So with all these details, a farmer card is issued, one of the country use case. And then this information is used as a kind of a collateral for banks to actually provide them loans, right? So I think substantial level use case is good, but it has to really drive value even for a low scale. Then country will actually trust, and then it goes into full production mode.
Okay, so I'm hearing there's trade-offs at the highest levels of assurance, which that terminology refers back to the regulation in the EU and also the NIST 863 guidelines in the United States. So if anyone has questions about the details of what the assurance levels are, we can catch up in the hallway. So I'm hearing that there's trade-offs at the highest level and the lowest level. That may be something that is like the 80-20 rule from Kristina's perspective is the best way to go. But whatever you choose, it must add value to the country in the way that the country is defining value. Okay, I would like to ask just one more question to my panelists, and that is, what role does conformance testing and certification play in this complex web of formats and standards?
Every format should be so lucky to have a good conformance regime. It's pretty hard for a government to do anything without that sort of objective qualification to be in the market.
Mm-hmm.
From the technical level, for the interoperability, that conformance test is something we are also going through. So that is absolutely required. And also we work with communities like FIDES and other wallet providers for the interoperability. Yeah, so this is required, but not on the governance level. We don't operate right now, but it's more on the technical level.
We have a sandbox right now where kind of the prototype stage where we're onboarding new relying parties to integrate with the wallet, and having a conformance test helps debugging so much. Like having this bare threshold that people can pass before they can start even trying to hit each other's endpoints, whatnot, is just invaluable. Like on the contrary, I know another sandbox another country is doing where there's no, you can sign up for it, but there's no guarantee you would even work with that country's wallet because there's no such kind of like bare checks. So that's like one practical experience we have. Really have a personal opinion, but I really don't think these conformance tests have to be really expensive. Like they really shouldn't. It's like it drives the healthy ecosystem, and certification is important, but like having a model and trying to make business of making people go through these complicated things is just something that, yeah, I don't think will help the ecosystem.
Yeah, it shouldn't be cost prohibitive.
Yeah, it's sort of like certification versus conformance. Like certification can lend itself to cartelization, and conformance can be more self-serve, and it's much more of a stitch in time. Like if there's conformance tests that are more self-serve or sandbox-based, they can speed up adoption in a more democratic way than saying, okay, only people that can invest $1 million 5 years in advance get to play, is like the worst case scenario.
So we also have other interoperability work with MOSIP, which is where we also provide compliance suits. Like biometric devices working with MOSIP is something to ensure that there is interoperable. There is a compliance toolkit that is available. As you rightly said, the conformance to the specification, it should be democratized. But the certification is a questionable thing. Again,
yeah,
it is on the
it's
governance.
a good clarification, yeah.
Kristina needs to go to her next panel.
Yeah, I just was noticing the time.
But if, I don't know if, well, you need to go to your next panel, so you probably can't stick around. But if anyone does have a burning question, I think the rest of us are here to take one or two. Hi.
I would like the panel to clarify what do you mean by translation of credential formats, because I haven't seen at all that can be done other than issuing a new credential. I think that's very important and a clarification that I would like to hear.
Translation between formats.
Oof. I sort of weasel worded between translation and notarization, because you break some of the security guarantees, right? Like you have to attach the original credential and it needs to be verifiable to really be certain to double check any notarization. So I was really referring more like to extracting and attesting rather than translating. Maybe that's more accurate in a technical sense.
All right. It was all clear. Thank you.